Imagine a man who owned nothing. No money. No fame. No army. Just words, and the courage to speak them. In the heart of ancient Athens, a city bursting with power, politics, and pride, one man dared to do the unthinkable. He questioned everything. The gods, the government, the moral values people lived by. To the rich and powerful, he was a nuisance, a barefoot old man wandering the streets, asking questions that made them uncomfortable. To the youth, he was a spark, a rebel of reason who taught them to think, not just obey. They called him strange. They called him dangerous. But to history, he became something greater. The father of Western philosophy. He didn't write a single book. He never founded a school. He claimed to know nothing. Yet, over 2,000 years later, we still speak his name. Why? Because Socrates didn't give answers, he gave us a way to find them. He taught that wisdom begins when we admit we don't know. That truth is worth more than comfort. And that living without questioning isn't really living at all. For the simple act of thinking differently, Athens sentenced him to death. But before he drank the poison, he left behind something eternal. A philosophy that still shapes how we live, learn, and question today. This is the story of Socrates. The man who questioned everything. And in doing so, taught humanity how to think. Chapter 1: The Mysterious Philosopher. Socrates was born in Athens around 469 BC, in a time when the city was at its peak, a golden age of art, democracy, and discovery. While others sought wealth and glory, Socrates was different. He didn't chase fame, didn't care about possessions, and never dressed to impress. He walked barefoot through the streets of Athens, wearing the same rough cloak every day. He wasn't handsome, in fact, by Greek standards, he was considered ugly, short, bald, with bulging eyes and a snub nose. But behind that ordinary face was an extraordinary mind. He spent his days in the agora, the public marketplace, not to buy or sell, but to talk. To question. To learn. Anyone could be his student, merchants, soldiers, politicians, even slaves. And all he asked in return was honesty. He believed that wisdom didn't belong to temples or scholars. It belonged to anyone brave enough to seek it. To him, philosophy wasn't about big words or complicated theories. It was about living better, understanding what it means to be good, just, and true. Socrates believed that every person carries knowledge inside them, like a hidden truth waiting to be discovered. His job was to help people find it, not by telling them answers, but by asking the right questions. He saw himself as a midwife of ideas. Just as a midwife helps deliver a child, Socrates helped deliver wisdom from the minds of others. He called this art maieutic, the birth of understanding. Through this, he became both loved and hated, admired for his honesty, despised for his questions. Because his conversations often left people exposed, their ignorance revealed, their pride shattered. But Socrates didn't humiliate for fun. He did it to free people, from illusion, from arrogance, from false certainty. He once said, "I am not an Athenian or a Greek, but a citizen of the world." To him, truth had no borders. And for that reason, his mind was centuries ahead of his time. Chapter 2: Method that changed philosophy. Socrates didn't lecture. He didn't stand on a stage or preach to the masses. Instead, he asked questions. Endless, curious, sometimes irritating questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is beauty? What makes a good life? These weren't meant to test people, they were meant to wake them. Most people, when questioned, gave confident answers. But Socrates would simply smile, tilt his head, and ask another question that shattered their certainty. Soon, they'd realize, they didn't actually know what they thought they knew. This was the Socratic method, a way of thinking through dialogue, not lecture. He believed that truth could only be discovered when ideas were tested, questioned, and stripped of falsehood. He once compared himself to a gadfly, a small insect that constantly stings a lazy horse to keep it moving. Athens, he said, was that lazy horse. And he was the gadfly that refused to let it sleep. His conversations were simple, but revolutionary. Instead of saying, "This is right," he asked, "How do you know this is right?" Instead of claiming wisdom, he searched for understanding through contradiction. By breaking down assumptions, Socrates forced people to think for themselves. He taught them that real knowledge begins with doubt, and that asking the right question was often more powerful than having the right answer. This ancient method became the foundation of Western philosophy, logic, and even science. Every time a scientist forms a hypothesis, every time a student debates, every time a lawyer cross-examines a witness, they are using the Socratic method. It's not about winning arguments. It's about discovering truth through honest questioning. Because, as Socrates believed, to find wisdom, you must first destroy illusion. Whether he was speaking to a farmer or a general, a poet or a politician, Socrates treated everyone the same way, as a fellow seeker of truth. And that simple act, treating thinking as a shared journey, changed the course of human thought forever. Chapter 3: The Wisdom of Ignorance. One day, a friend asked the oracle of Delphi, the most sacred temple in Greece, "Who is the wisest man in Athens?" And the oracle replied, "Socrates." When Socrates heard this, he laughed. "How can I be the wisest?" he said. "I know nothing." But that very statement was what made him wise. He didn't believe wisdom came from having answers. He believed it came from knowing what you don't know. He saw the world filled with people pretending to understand, politicians who claimed to know justice, poets who claimed to know beauty, craftsmen who claimed to know truth. But when he questioned them, their confidence collapsed. They knew words, but not meaning. So Socrates concluded something profound. The difference between him and others wasn't that he knew more, but that he knew his own ignorance. That single sentence, "I know that I know nothing," became the cornerstone of philosophy itself. Because it turns pride into curiosity. It reminds us that knowledge isn't a finish line. It's a journey. To admit ignorance is to open your mind. To pretend certainty is to close it. That's why Socrates questioned everything, not to destroy truth, but to find it. He believed every great discovery begins with doubt. Even today, scientists, thinkers, and creators follow that same path. Asking questions no one dares to ask. Challenging what everyone assumes is true. Socrates showed us that humility isn't weakness, it's strength. Because the more you learn, the more you realize how little you truly know. His wisdom wasn't in answers. It was in awareness. Awareness of our limits, and the courage to question them. And that awareness would later inspire his greatest student, Plato, to build an entire philosophy upon his teacher's words. Chapter: For his students and legacy. Voiceover? Socrates never wrote a single word. No book. No essay. No teachings etched in stone. He believed that writing froze ideas, turned living thoughts into lifeless ink. And for him, truth was something alive, something that had to be spoken, questioned, challenged. But fate gave him a voice that would never die, through his students. One of those students was Plato, a young man from an aristocratic family who found in Socrates what he could never find in politics: truth. He saw how this strange, humble man could destroy lies with nothing but questions. And how he lived his philosophy, not just spoke it. After Socrates' death, Plato would devote his life to preserving his teacher's words. He wrote dialogues, conversations where Socrates was always the central voice, the questioner, the seeker of truth. Because of Plato, we know who Socrates was. Every conversation, every debate, every spark of wisdom survived through his writings. And through Plato came another student, Aristotle. Together, these three, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, became the foundation of Western thought. Socrates asked questions about morality and virtue. Plato built a philosophy of ideal forms and justice. Aristotle brought those ideas down to earth, to logic, science, and reason. From a single man in the streets of Athens came a lineage that shaped education, ethics, politics, and psychology for over 2,000 years. Whenever a teacher encourages a student to think critically, whenever a scientist challenges a theory, whenever you pause and ask yourself, why do I believe this? You are keeping Socrates alive. His legacy isn't carved in marble. It lives in the mind. Every time a question sparks a thought. But in his own lifetime, his legacy came with a price. Because the same questions that opened minds also angered those in power. And soon, the city he loved would turn against him. Chapter 5: The Trial and Death. By the time Socrates reached his 70s, he had become one of the most recognizable figures in Athens. The old man with the torn cloak, barefoot, standing in the marketplace, asking dangerous questions that no one wanted to answer. To the youth, he was a hero. A thinker who showed them that truth mattered more than tradition. But to the powerful, he was a threat. He had embarrassed generals, questioned priests, and made politicians look like fools. Not through anger, but through logic. And so, in 399 BC, they decided they had enough. Socrates was put on trial, accused of 2 crimes: corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods of Athens. The courtroom was packed. Hundreds of jurors, all citizens, came to witness the trial of the man who had questioned their beliefs for decades. He could have begged for mercy. He could have denied everything. But he didn't. He stood before them and said, "I will not stop philosophizing. Even if you spare me today, I will continue to question. Because to live without examining life is no life at all." His words stunned the court. This wasn't a man defending himself. This was a man defending truth itself. The verdict was predictable. He was found guilty by a narrow margin. Then the jury asked what punishment he believed he deserved. Socrates smiled. He suggested, half seriously, that instead of punishment, he should be rewarded. "Perhaps," he said, "I should be given free meals for life, for serving Athens by teaching its people to think." The court was furious. The vote came again. This time, the sentence was death. They offered him a choice. Stop teaching, leave Athens, and live. Or drink the poison, and die. Socrates didn't hesitate. He chose death. Because to him, abandoning truth was worse than dying. He believed a philosopher should never fear death. For death was merely the separation of the soul from the body. A passage to greater understanding. He took the cup with steady hands. He spoke his final words. "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Pay the debt and do not neglect it." A cryptic sentence. But one that meant, thank the God of healing, for death, at last, has cured me of life. He died as he lived, calm, fearless, and free. The man who questioned everything was silenced. But his silence would echo louder than his words ever did. And that echo would become the heartbeat of philosophy itself. Chapter 6: The Socratic Legacy Today. More than 2,000 years have passed. Empires have risen and fallen, languages have changed, the world has transformed, but Socrates still lives. Not in temples, not in statues, but in every mind that dares to ask why. Every time you question a rule, challenge a belief, or ask yourself if you truly know what you think you know, you are carrying forward the spirit of Socrates. He showed us that truth isn't inherited, it's discovered. That real wisdom isn't about having answers, but about having the courage to search for them. In a world filled with noise and opinions, Socrates reminds us of something simple: question everything, including yourself. Because the greatest enemy of wisdom is certainty. He taught that philosophy isn't an ancient relic, it's a way of living. It's in the courage to say, "I don't know." It's in the humility to listen. It's in the strength to change your mind. When Athens killed him, they thought they were silencing a man. But instead, they gave birth to an idea that would outlive the city itself. Today, Socrates' voice still whispers across time, reminding us that our greatest power is not in knowing, but in questioning. So the next time you're certain you're right, pause and ask yourself, what would Socrates say? If you watch the video till this end, then you definitely want to learn philosophy, then you must subscribe this channel for more upcoming videos. Before leaving a like for this video, comment your favorite part about Socrates.